Hey, Jeremy Cubas here, and welcome to our new show under the Contra Gentiles podcast called Let's Be Rational Here. Now, the madness of the contemporary world cannot be overstated. You have people subscribing to epistemic relativity, moral relativity. You have many conservatives who believe that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You have many conservatives believing also in the first wave feminism. They believe in the absurd narrative that we have seen tremendous academic progress and that everybody in the medieval period was simply backwards and unproductive and unintelligent. And so what I really want to show is how the fundamental ideas that we see that formulates the contemporary world has led to a lot of the absurd and insane behaviors, right? You see people willfully genitally mutilating themselves due to some kind of fantasy within their head. You have 20% of Gen Zers claiming that they are part of the LGBTQ whatever plus sign group, and a vast majority of them are calling themselves trans. You have globally over 73 million unborn children killed every year. I mean, think about how crazy that is. You know, we have this figure, Hitler, for example, who we all deem as, the most absolute evil person that's ever existed. And he only killed 6 million Jews within the span of 11 years, from 1933 to 1945. We kill 73 million globally every single year. Think about that madness. And we go about our days just being like, hey, doesn't concern me. Or you have even more insane people walking around shouting their abortion and just completely embracing all of this absurdity as a good. Now, so yes, the world has gone crazy. It's batshit crazy. And that's why we started Contra Gentiles 4 years ago now. We wanted to have a counter narrative, a counter argument to much of this madness in the world. And in this show, I want to continue that tradition and I want to continue exposing the madness. However, I'm going to do a little bit differently. It's going to be shorter, and also we want to be focusing on specific logical deductions. So on Let's Be Rational, we're going to be unpacking much of the arguments that we see in the contemporary world. We're going to unpack them and show its irrationality, show its fallacies. And part of the reason is because, although there are many, I believe, factors that play a role into the madness of the world, I believe a significant factor of it is the loss of reason, is the fact that we no longer hold logic as a virtue. It is because most people behave more passionately, more erratically, and based on the whims in which they have today. So just for a fair warning for everybody, this podcast will be extremely technical. It's not going to just be fluff. On the show, we get technical, but we also have a conversation. Grant and I could banter and everything. This one, we're going to try to focus a little bit more on the logical side, and we're going to try to break down many of the reasons that we see in the madness of the contemporary world, or at least the foundational principles that formulate much of the madness in the contemporary world. So for the first episode, I really want to focus on epistemic relativity. Now, the reason why I want to focus on it is because I believe it is one of the pillars in the modern world that has led to much of the madness. And it is so widely accepted by many, even if they accept it sometimes when it's convenient for them, for like the average person. But then if you look at many of the academics in the world, if you look at people college educated and above, it becomes a vast majority of them that believe in this epistemic relativity. And we see it manifested in various ways in pop culture, right? They would say it's your truth, it's my truth, it's her truth, it's Zer's truth or whatever. There is no more appealing to truth itself. In fact, many times they believe that if you appeal to truth itself, it is somehow racist or bigoted. I remember reading this article, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but I'm reading an article that said that they believe that teaching math was bigoted because all you're doing is showing the developments of the way the white mind thinks. So that this is the way that we are viewing things now. We always view things as contingent upon societal or familial development. No longer that there is a universal truth in which we're trying to appeal to, which we're trying to grasp at. And that's where I think a lot of the madness begins to come from. And so let's look at this a little bit, right? And so when you have an epistemic relative position, you normally have to assert some kind of proposition. And so if we want to formulate the proposition as accurate as possible, and as intellectually honest as possible, their proposition is that there is no universal truth. Or let me repeat that. There is no universal truth. This is the proposition that undergirds every other formulation of it. When somebody says, no, that's just your truth, what they're implicitly saying is that there is no universal truth. That's just your truth, but that's not my truth. Right? And when you see the transgender movement, this is what it's based on. It's saying that there is no such thing as a universal truth within sex or gender. There's only subjective reflections of it. And so we can identify as a woman if you're born a man. And that identification means that you're actually that thing. And so it does go a little bit beyond epistemic relativity, and we'll get to that in another episode. But for this one, we want to stick onto truth claim, not so much just the epistemic ontology that I think is derived from epistemic relativity. But simply put, we see it formulated in a variety of different ways. I still remember the first time that I heard it. I believe I was in middle school. It might have been sixth grade, but I was very, very young. And you hear teachers many times say this, especially if you're taking social studies class and a student asks a question about why does the society do something like that? They want to reduce it down to, well, those are only the societal norms of that time period, and that there is nothing universal that they're appealing to. And this is kind of like the beginnings that we see this, many of us experience through grade school, middle school, and obviously through high school and definitely through college. And so that's why I kind of want to focus on it, and it's unfortunate that one of our earlier episodes with in Contra Gentiles, I think was the episode that we actually had the first big guest on, and that was Thaddeus Russell. And so Thaddeus Russell came on and we debated this, but the episode never really got released, which is unfortunate, but at least we could cover the same topic that we have here now. And so the formulation, there is no universal truth. Now, this formulation is a proposition. And now, just to be a little more technical, if we want to dig back into our memories of grade school, right? There was 4 types of sentences that can be made. There's an interrogatory sentence, which is a question. There's an imperative, which is a command. There's exclamatory, which is like, holy shit, you're simply exclaiming something, or son of a bitch. And then there's a declarative, like the wall is white. Now, each one of these sentences are unique and different, but the only one that really matters in terms of logic is the declarative sentence. Because a declarative sentence is the only one that has truth value, right? If I say the wall is white, it is either the case that it is white or it is not the case that it is white. And so it's either the case that it is true or it's either the case that it is false. There's a certain truth value to that. If I were to ask the question, is the wall white? There's no truth value in that because I'm simply asking the question. I'm looking for the truth for somebody to make in a declarative sentence to tell me, yes, it is white or not white. If I were to just exclaim, holy shit, and I'm looking at a white wall, it doesn't have any truth value. I'm just exclaiming. If I say, go punch the wall, again, there's no truth value. I'm commanding it. So these other type of sentences has no truth value, but declarative sentence does. In logic, we call these propositions. And so when we analyze certain propositions, all propositions have what are known as immediate inferences based on its truth value. And so the 3 types that you would have would be a contrary or a subcontrary, depending on its whether it's universal or particular, its subalternation and its contradiction. And these are what you can have immediately from the proposition itself. And so when we ask ourselves, what are the immediate inferences of this particular proposition, we have to begin to analyze the proposition. So let's look at the proposition. There is no universal truth. Now, categorically speaking, this is understood as an E proposition. Now, the E proposition will be reformulated categorical form as to no truth are universal. So there is nothing in the category of truth that's inside of the category of universal. And so this has its quality and its quantity as negative universal. It is true. What this proposition is saying is that it is universally true, because it's a universal proposition. It is universally true that nothing of truth is inside universality, that there are no truths that are universal. And so it's a negative universal proposition. So now, given that, when we further analyze this, we could see that we could formulate its contrary, its subalternation, and its contradiction. The contrary proposition of no truth are universal, or if you look at it syntactically, no TRU, would be that all TRU, that all truth are universal. Its subalternation would be some truth are not universal, and its contradiction would be some truth are universal. So now, when we look at this and you place the truth value in the first given proposition, would be no truth are universal would be true, and then its subalternation must also be true, and its contrary must be false. So if it is true that no truth are universal, then all truth are universal must be false. Now, where this proposition runs into an issue is when we look at its contradiction. So if it is true that no truth are universal, and then it must be false that some truth are universal, because it's contradiction to its given proposition and its truth value as being true. Now, the way that this presents itself now is an absurdity, because one is stating that it is universally true that there is no universal truth, which means that there is at least one truth that is universally true, and that is that there is no universal truth. And so let me try to maybe reword that if it's a bit confusing. If you were to state it is true that there is no universal truth, because of its structure, that it is a universally negative proposition, because you're saying that the entirety, universally, the entirety of the category truth is not found in the entirety of the category universal. This is why with every E proposition, you could flip the subject and a predicate and it keeps the same meaning. If you were to state, for example, no cats are dogs, it doesn't change its meaning to say no dogs are cats. Its subject and its predicate, since it is known universally in this proposition, means that both terms are distributed. It means the truth value are distributed in both in both terms, which is the subject and the predicate, so that the truth value does not change if you swap the subject and a predicate. So given that it is universally true, you are stating that it is universally true that there is no universal truth. But his contradiction would say there is at least one thing that is true. And so it must be at least true that there is no truth in order for its contradiction to be false. But if that is the case, the contradiction cannot be true. So then there is nothing that is true, including that there is no truth. And so if this entire thing is kind of making you go mad and insane, I mean, it should. And it's making you go insane because this proposition is an incoherent proposition. It is absurd in its very structure. It is both syntactically and semantically absurd. It doesn't make any sense to claim truthfully that there is nothing that is true. You can't claim that. Not epistemically anyways. Obviously that words could come out of your mouth. I could also say square circle. Just imagine what a square circle is. You can't. You might have like these sharp corners with bubbles everywhere, but that's not a circle, nor is that a square. Think of a triangled square. What would that look like? How can you make a square that only has 3 sides? That is not a triangle. So it's a triangled square. It is an absurd statement equal to that absurdity. When you say there is no universally true, or you are saying that it is true that there is nothing that is universally true. And if you're saying that it is universally true that there is no universal truth, you already have at least one truth that is true, which would be that there is no universal truth. And so this proposition falls apart in itself. It is literally one of the most absurd propositions that anyone could ever make. You could say purple monkey dishwasher is green, And that would be more coherent than claiming that there is no universal truth. So you could see why some of the madness is derived from this one very, very simple yet absurd proposition that permeates our culture. We see it on television. We hear it at school. We hear it at the universities. And it infiltrates our minds to the point that we think it is taboo to tell people, no, there is universal truth. That men are men and women are women. Or whatever kind of claim you want to make. But the fact that we can claim that things are universally true. The moment you speak and you make propositional statements, the moment you make a declarative sentence, there's already truth value in there. If you truly want to be an epistemic relativist, you say nothing. You'll be like Melville's character, Bartleby the Scrivener, who in the end didn't do or say anything, but died sitting under a tree. And that, it will be the show for today. So leave a comment, leave a question on Twitter, and on the next episode, I'm going to try to answer that at the end of the episode. But thank you, and good luck.